Former Justice Department Special Counsel Jack Smith is sitting for a closed-door deposition with House Republicans this hour. House Judiciary Committee members digging into his investigations into President Trump. Smith arrived on Capitol Hill moments ago, as you see here, and this deposition is part of an ongoing investigation into criminal inquiries of President Trump during the Biden administration. Smith, as you'll remember, led the investigations into Mr. Trump's efforts to overturn his 2020 presidential election and the classified documents at his Mar-a-Lago estate in Palm Beach, Florida. CBS News Department of Justice reported Special Counsel Jack Smith has returned to the public eye. And let me tell you, this is exactly what needed to happen. The House Oversight Committee had a plan. They wanted to drag him into a closed-door session, keep everything hidden from the American people, hoping nobody would hear what he had to say about the crimes he prosecuted Donald Trump for. Well, that plan just blew up in their faces today because Jack Smith delivered an opening statement. And thanks to some excellent reporting, we know exactly what he told them. You're watching coverage here, and we need to break down what just happened with Jack Smith's testimony and what it means for our understanding of Trump's conduct. I'm glad you're joining me for this. Before we go further, make sure you're subscribed. We're working to hit that 50,000 subscriber milestone, and your support makes all the difference here. So here's what Jack Smith laid out in his opening remarks, and I want you to understand how devastating this is for Donald Trump's narrative. Smith stated clearly, "Our investigation developed proof beyond a reasonable doubt that President Trump engaged in a criminal scheme to overturn the results of the 2020 presidential election and to prevent the lawful transfer of power. Our investigation also developed powerful evidence that showed President Trump willfully retained highly classified documents after he left office in January 2021, storing them at his social club, Mar-a-Lago, including in a bathroom, a ballroom, and where events and gatherings took place." Now, let me break this down for you because this is critically important. We don't have video of this testimony yet. And why is that? Because the MAGA Republicans who control these committees don't want you, the American people, to hear directly from Jack Smith. They're terrified of what happens when the public gets the full picture. But even though they tried to hide this behind closed doors, we're still hearing from Jack Smith. And what he's saying is powerful. Listen to the language he's using here. Our investigation developed proof beyond a reasonable doubt. That's crucial because that standard is actually higher than what's required just to bring criminal charges. When you're seeking an indictment, you need to establish probable cause. You need to show there's reason to believe you could sustain a conviction through the appeals process. But proof beyond a reasonable doubt, that's the trial standard. That's what you need to convince a jury. So what Smith is telling us here is that he had even more evidence than was necessary to bring these cases in the first place. Think about what that means. Smith continued in his statement, explaining how exploiting that violence on January 6th, President Trump and his associates tried to call members of Congress in furtherance of their criminal scheme, urging them to further delay certification of the 2020 election. This connects to what we learned about Arctic haze. The investigation into those phone calls. Jack Smith's team didn't need wiretaps. They obtained telephone billing records that showed exactly who was calling whom and when, creating a roadmap of coordination between the White House and members of Congress during those critical hours. And here's where Smith really drives the point home. I didn't choose those members that were called. President Trump did. He's making it crystal clear that this wasn't some prosecutorial overreach or fishing expedition. He followed the evidence that Trump's own actions created. Now, this isn't the first time we've heard Jack Smith speak publicly about these cases. I want to take you back to when he first announced the indictment. In fact, there's video of that announcement that's still up on the Department of Justice website as we speak. Though after they see this coverage, who knows how long it'll stay there. But let's go back to that moment when Jack Smith stood before the American people and explained why these charges were being brought. Good evening. Today, an indictment was unsealed, charging Donald J. Trump with conspiring to defraud the United States, conspiring to disenfranchise voters, and conspiring and attempting to obstruct an official proceeding. The indictment was issued by a grand jury of citizens here in the District of Columbia, and it sets forth the crimes charged in detail. I encourage everyone to read it in full. The attack on our nation's capital on January 6, 2021, was an unprecedented assault on the seat of American democracy. Described in the indictment, it was fueled by lies. Lies by the defendant targeted at obstructing a bedrock function of the U.S. government, the nation's process of collecting, counting, and certifying the results of the presidential election. The men and women of law enforcement who defended the U.S. Capitol on January 6th are heroes. They are patriots, and they are the very best of us. They did not just defend a building or the people sheltering in it. They put their lives in the line to defend who we are as a country and as a people. They defended the very institutions and principles that define the United States. Since the attack on our capital, the Department of Justice has remained committed to ensuring accountability for those criminally responsible for what happened that day. This case is brought consistent with that commitment, and our investigation of other individuals continues. And that's not the only time we've heard from Jack Smith recently. Just a few months ago, when he knew he was going to be subpoenaed by Congress, when he understood they were going to drag him in for testimony, he started getting his story out there on his own terms. He sat down with Andrew Weissman for an interview. I believe it was actually conducted overseas, and talked extensively about his investigation and his time at the Department of Justice. This wasn't someone hiding from scrutiny. This was someone ready to defend the work he'd done. Let me show you what Smith said in that conversation. The idea that politics would play a role in big cases like this, it's absolutely ludicrous, and it's totally contrary to my experience as a prosecutor. These are team players who don't want anything but to do good in the world. They're not interested in politics. And I get very concerned when I see how easy it is to demonize these people for political ends. I worked in the department for years, Republican, Democrat, Republican. I was the acting U.S. attorney in the first Trump administration in Tennessee. Nothing like what we see now has ever gone on. If there's rules in the department about how to bring a case, follow those rules. You can't say, I want this outcome, let me throw the rules out. The problem is not prosecuting high officials who did something wrong when you do it according to the processes of law in your country. It's the retaliation that's the problem. Now, I want to bring up something really important here. Jamie Raskin, who's the ranking member for Democrats on the House Judiciary Committee, and I've actually had the pleasure of meeting him and introducing him at a fundraiser recently. He had some pointed words about his Republican colleagues' decision to keep Jack Smith's testimony behind closed doors. Why wouldn't they want this public? Why wouldn't they want the American people to hear what Smith has to say, especially when we had the January 6th committee hearings that were broadcast for everyone to see? Raskin nailed exactly what's going on here. So, let's hear what he had to say about this whole situation. Play that clip. Want to say that Chairman Jordan made an excellent decision in not allowing Jack Smith to testify publicly, because had he done so, it would have been absolutely devastating to the president and all the president's men involved in the insurrectionary activities of January the 6th. So, I can't get into any further particulars, but I'll just say that Jack Smith has just spent several hours schooling the Judiciary Committee on the professional responsibilities of a prosecutor and the ethical duties of a prosecutor, and he's a sensational and honorable public servant, and we are lucky to have him in the bar in the United States of America. You describe at least what his message was generally to the committee? No, again, he's being answered. He's been asked he's answering questions. So he didn't come with any particular message. But I'll just say that he's answered every single question to the satisfaction of any reasonable-minded person in that room. Any conclusion that he reached at the end of his investigation that he disclosed with the committee in the deposition, well, his report speaks for itself in terms of January the 6th and the indictments that were handed down, and the other reports should be public. I mean, that's just absolutely aberrational that it's not public, just like his testimony should be public. Every other special counsel's been able to come here and testify. Robert Mueller's been able to testify. Robert Hur's been able to testify. All the special counsels and independent counsels have come in, and his second report on the retention of classified documents and what crimes may have been committed should also be released. But there's actually even more that came out of Smith's testimony today, and I want to make sure you hear all of it, because every detail matters. Smith stated clearly, "The decision to bring charges against President Trump was mine, but the basis for those charges rest entirely with President Trump and his actions as alleged in the indictments, returned by grand juries in 2 different districts, e-zoning his decision while also making it absolutely clear that Trump created this situation through his own conduct." Smith maintained that his team found evidence to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that he engaged in that criminal scheme. Again, that highest standard of proof. Then he said something that goes to the heart of all the partisan attacks against him. "I made my decision in the investigation without regard to President Trump's political association, activities, beliefs, or candidacy in the 2024 presidential election. We took actions," meaning his team took actions based on what the facts and the law required. The very lesson I learned early in my career as a prosecutor. And here's the part that should shut down all the partisan nonsense. He said he would have made the exact same decision if Trump had been a Democrat or Republican. This was a direct response to GOP committee members who've been pushing this narrative that Smith was pursuing some kind of partisan vendetta. Look, we're still waiting on something important here. We're waiting for Alan Cannon or the 11th Circuit Court of Appeals to release Volume 2 of the Jack Smith report, the part dealing with Mar-a-Lago. We already got Volume 1 on the election interference case, and if you read that Volume 1 alongside the January 6th committee's report, the picture becomes incredibly clear. So why are they calling Jack Smith to testify now? I'm glad they are, don't get me wrong, but let's be honest about what's happening. Donald Trump wants Jack Smith prosecuted. He wants him investigated for what? For doing his job. For doing it in a non-partisan way. For following the evidence wherever it led. Think about this for a second. If a Democrat had done even half of what Donald Trump did, just half, they'd be prosecuted. They'd be investigated, and we'd all support that happening because we believe in accountability under the law. What's going to happen now is we're going to see 2 competing media campaigns play out. Jim Jordan and the other chairs on these MAGA-controlled House committees are going to try to spin this. They'll carefully spoon-feed selected information to friendly outlets. They'll release the transcript eventually, probably hoping to bury it so nobody actually reads it. They definitely won't release video of the testimony. They wouldn't allow it to be televised because, as Jamie Raskin pointed out, they've got everything to hide. That's one media campaign. But then you've got Jack Smith on the other side, and he's got some really capable lawyers representing him, people like Abby Lell and a whole team around him, and they're going to make sure the truth gets out. I think we're going to see more public statements from Smith, more speeches, more interviews. Maybe we can even get him to sit down for a conversation here. Jack Smith, if you're listening, consider this an open invitation. I think our audience would be incredibly receptive to hearing directly from you about all of this. The point is, we're going to see these 2 competing narratives battle it out in the media landscape. But here's the thing, the American people have already made up their minds about a lot of this. They know Donald Trump is a convicted felon. They know he's engaged in underhanded activities even now, and they know he's trying to hide things from public view. If Republicans thought this testimony was going to give them some kind of framework to attack Smith, if they thought they could use this alongside all these carefully staged interviews the Trump administration is doing, like that Vanity Fair piece with Susie Wiles or Trump's various interview appearances or his big speech tonight about his supposed economic accomplishments, and maybe whether we're heading to war with Venezuela, if they thought they could weave Jack Smith into that narrative, as some kind of villain, it completely backfired because Jack Smith isn't a bad guy. He's a competent, talented civil servant who did his job without fear of retribution, without showing favor to anyone, following the facts wherever they led him. He represented the Department of Justice when it still meant something. Remember when the Department of Justice had values, when it had a reputation for integrity before it was corrupted by Trump and Pam Bondi. Look at the contrast we're seeing here. On one side, you've got Jack Smith, someone who's dedicated his career to the rule of law, committed to his professional duties as an officer of the court. And on the other side, look at what the Department of Justice has become under Trump's control. It's corrupted, it's partisan, it's political. You can't trust a word that comes out of that building anymore. We're going to keep following all of these developments right here. Make sure you hit that subscribe button and help me cross that 50,000 subscriber milestone. I think we can get there before Christmas, but it's only going to happen with your support. Let's keep holding power accountable together. Now, I want to bring up something really important here. Jamie Rassin, who's the ranking member for Democrats on the House Judiciary Committee, and I've actually had the pleasure of meeting him and introducing him at a fundraiser recently. He had some pointed words about his Republican colleagues' decision to keep Jack Smith's testimony behind closed doors. Why wouldn't they want this public? Why wouldn't they want the American people to hear what Smith has to say? Especially when we had the January 6th committee hearings that were broadcast for everyone to see. Rashin nailed exactly what's going on here. So let's hear what he had to say about this whole situation. Play that clip.